Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Getting Valuable Data from Google Analytics webinar. Today's webinar is sponsored by the Orange County government. My name is Teresa and I will be your tech support and organizer for this webinar. And our presenter today is Matt Weber with Roar Marketing. I believe it's Roar on the Web Marketing, correct?
Roar Internet Marketing.
Roar Internet Marketing. Oh, sorry. My shorthand. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we will begin shortly. Just a little bit of introduction about how today's webinar will go and a little bit of information about our organization so you know why we're doing what we're doing today. So again, this webinar is sponsored by the Orange County government. So it's because of them that we're able to bring this to you at no cost today. A copy of today's presentation is not in your materials section, unfortunately. The program we were not able to get it uploaded, but you will be emailed to you, have it emailed to you at the end of this webinar. So you will all receive an email with our survey for today's webinar and the material and the document with Matt's presentation and the information from our organization. Your questions will need to be entered into the questions chat box in order for us to hear them. We have no mics on today's webinar. There is also a little bit of a delay between when you ask your question and when I receive it. So we will be taking questions as they come. Feel free to continue to ask them. And when Matt stops somewhere along the way, that's when I'll go ahead and relay them to him. We are a member of the Florida SBDC Network, which was established in 1976 by the U.S. Small Business Administration to provide technical assistance to small businesses. Our Florida network is part of a nationwide network of small business development centers with nearly 1,000 local centers across 50 states and U.S. territories. We are funded in part by the U.S. SBA, the state of Florida, and other local economic development organizations. We are state designated as Florida's principal provider of business assistance and nationally accredited. The state of Florida consists of 9 regions. Within our region, we have 8 counties: Brevard, Flagler, Lake, Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Sumter, and Volusia. Our core center in Orange County is part of the University of Central Florida. And it's important to know who we are connected to because it provides us with an amazing amount of market research. As part of our services that we provide on a regular business, we provide one-on-one, no-cost business consulting. Because your tax dollars pay for us, we are here to help you get your business either up and running, help your business grow, or if you are ready to finish your business, we can help advise you on that part as well. We offer specialized programs beyond our standard consulting, including our ABC program, which is our Advisory Board Council, our SBI program, Small Business Institute program, and our CEO Exchange are just 3 of the few programs that we offer. We do also offer training in person and online. Welcome, you're joining us for our online session today. And we have an extensive amount of market research because we are both part of the University of Central Florida and we are part of that nationwide network and the Florida network. They all have different opportunities for us to use their research options to help you grow your business. And when assisting, some of the things we assist with include an increase in your sales, reduction of costs, improvement of your cash flow. We help you with government contracting as well, obtaining financing, and improving your marketing, which we're hoping this session will also help you with today. Many things you do in your business you think are in one area, but it affects everything else. So, Matt has a lot of knowledge in all of this. So we're happy to start there. And with that being said, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and have you share your screen and turn it over to you shortly. You should start getting a notification now.
All right.
And I will be turning my mic off while Matt talks, but I will still be here. Please feel free to enter in any questions in your chat and we will be good to go. And I'll be happy to relay them to Matt. Thank you.
Hey, well, welcome everybody. Thanks, Teresa. Welcome everybody to Getting Valuable Data from Google Analytics. My name is Matt Weber, and currently I'm the president of Roar Internet Marketing, but I think way more important for you today is that I've been training people in Google Analytics and Google Ads for more than a decade. And pre-COVID, I taught in 30 states and throughout Canada. And after COVID, I've been so fortunate to be invited to programs like this. And I've taught over 2,000 people through virtual programs like this after COVID. I've been working in digital marketing from 2006. And I've been so excited to see the changes and the evolution and what's happening. And the greatest thing about today's program is knowing that businesses have this valuable data that they can use to make great marketing decisions. That before the internet, this data was all in the hands of media outlets and advertising agencies, but now it's in your hands, and today's program is about teaching you how to use it. Now, this is one of my favorite programs because it attracts such a diversity of people. We get all kinds of people with different Google Analytics experience. And, my experiences today, we've got some beginners, some people who are just starting out their Google Analytics journey and probably don't have an account yet. We also have today the largest group, which are what I call taste testers, which means you've got a Google Analytics account. You've probably been in there 3 to 4 times, maybe 5 times in the past 6 months, but you don't use it regularly. And then the second largest group that this program usually attracts are verifiers, people that get data from a third party, an agency, maybe their website platform, and they want to kind of validate it, or they want to see if they can enrich it in some way. And then finally, we get what are called, I tend to see as regular users, people that are in Google Analytics, and they want to see if anything's changed in there, and that's why they're there. Now, what I'd like to ask you to do, if you don't mind, it's in the chat. This link's in the chat. If you would click on that, and it's an anonymous 2-question survey to figure out which one of those 4 categories you fall into, because toward the end of the program, depending how it flows, I think I'm going to be able to adjust some of the content as we go forward, depending on who's in the program today. Is that fair? So if you could just take a couple minutes, fill that out, 2 questions, completely anonymous, helps me determine what the end of the program is going to be like. All right, now, if you've been to any kind of Google Analytics program ever, you know how easy it is to get lost in the woods, right? I mean, there's so much jargon in Google Analytics. You could create an entire language around the jargon in Google Analytics. I mean, I could literally talk for 12 hours on Google Analytics. But since you guys have only signed up for 8 hours today, this is how we're going to attack it. This is going to be our agenda. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to spend 5 minutes for first timers. And for those of you that are on the program today that are taste testers or regular users, I really appreciate your patience. I'm going to take a little bit of time just to make sure everybody in the program maybe gets close to the same starting point. So if you are already conversant in Google Analytics and you've already got your account, maybe this first 5 minutes is a great opportunity for you to just refresh your coffee, come right back, and then we'll get going. Don't check your email, because I know what happens when you check your email, but that's the first thing on the agenda is 5 minutes for first timers. And then we're going to talk briefly about Google Tag Manager, which is an important part of this ecosystem, but not a mandatory part of this ecosystem. So we'll do that, and then we're going to take a pre-flight check and just go over some things that you should do before you try to get data out of Google Analytics to make sure that you've got it set up correctly. Now, of all the Google Analytics accounts I've seen since GA4 came around, and whether that's consulting that we do or clients, which I would say is about 50 accounts, I've only seen one that was set up correctly. And that's kind of the interesting thing about GA4 is it just doesn't work as easily out of the box as the previous version did. So we'll talk about how to check a couple things to make sure yours is working very well. And then we'll talk about the actual backbone of Google Analytics GA4 currently, which are events and key events. If you understand the concept of events and key events, that'll get you a long way to getting good data, usable data out of Google Analytics. We'll spend a little bit of time making some connections with our Google Analytics account and Google Ads and Google Search Console, which of course can really broaden the things that you get out of Google Analytics. Worth doing, very easy to do. We'll show you how to do that. And then we'll get into, I think, what most of you came today, which is the top 5 pieces of data to get out of GA4. Now, this is where we're going to stay out of the woods, because rather than try to teach you everything about Google Analytics, we're going to say, here's 5 things that can really change how you market your company tomorrow. And let's show you how to get them and make sure you can do that. And then we've got a couple bonus tips, which I think I can adjust a little bit depending on what happens in that survey. And then I always hate webinars that kind of leave you hanging like, okay, well, that was really good, but what do I do with that information? So we'll close with some very specific action tips, things that you should do tomorrow as a result of the things that we talked about today. So how's it sound? Good agenda?
So, Matt, it looks like the poll is giving some people you need permission to view this poll, so it may not be public. Do you want me to just have them type in the chat whether or not they are beginner, taste tester, verifier, and regular user, and
Yeah.
I can update you when everybody types that in?
Yeah, it sounds great.
All right. If you guys will, I'll go ahead and add it to the chat so you guys will know which option to pick. And then when you text it to me, by the time Matt needs the information, hopefully I'll have a good number of count to give him.
Very good. So let's dive into it then, because we've got quite a bit to talk about. Here's a couple things to maybe help you get more out of the program. Now, if you're conversant with Google Analytics and you have an account, might help you to have your Google Analytics account open if you have another screen, because this is going to be a little bit of a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 type presentation. And so if you're comfortable, you might want to follow along. However, you're going to get the slides, and I believe you're going to get a recording. So what you may want to do is just sit back, get comfortable, and embrace the concepts that we talk about today, and use the slides and the presentation to go for the nitty-gritty of the step 1 and step 2, step 3. And when we get to that portion of the program, the slides themselves are formatted so that the actual steps are easy to see and very clear. Now, keep in mind that bad data has the same value as no data. So that's why we're going to spend a little bit of time making sure that yours is set up correctly. And I would say with GA4, it's a higher chance that you might need some professional consultation to be able to do that than the previous version did. Now, this is definitely going to generate some questions. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat, and Teresa's going to go through them, kind of filter out the duplicates, and then we've got a long period of time saved at the end to make sure we answer all of your questions. But the reason I'll ask you to put them at the end, I want to make sure you get out of here on time and to make sure that we keep the flow going pretty quickly. All right. With that said, let's dive right into it with our 5 minutes for first timers. Now, remember, to do anything we talk about today, you do need a Google account. Remember that any email address can be a Google account. A Gmail address is automatically a Google account, but you have to have one of those to do anything we talk about today. Now, here's a language issue that I want to resolve up front that's going to confuse some people. That currently, what is known as GA4 is the default. That's what you're going to sign up for. And I say that because many of you experienced the overlap of the previous version called Universal Analytics and this new version, GA4. Now, GA4, all that means is it's the 4th version of Google Analytics. But since there's no other version available now, and we don't need to distinguish, you're going to find that many times today, I'm simply going to use the term Google Analytics to refer to GA4 because it's the only one available now. It's the default, and that's the one that you're going to sign up for. So if you're just beginning, you're going to go to google.com/analytics and click Get Started Today. Now, once you do that, there's a little bit of a strange question pops up, and it says, what should your account name be? And for most of you, the account name is going to be your business name. Now, remember that Google Analytics can be divided up into properties. And a property can be used for either a website or an app, which is one of the big changes of GA4 compared to previous versions, is that it is designed to get great analytics data from your app if you so happen to have one. But even many companies today have multiple websites. And for example, I'm working right now with a company that has an e-commerce website to sell their pre-produced machines, but where they really make their money is building custom solutions for companies. So they have a WooCommerce site for their pre-produced, and they have a separate website that sells through their customer solutions. So they'll have one Google Analytics account and then one property for the WooCommerce site and another property for their other website on a different domain that actually allows them to sell their custom solutions. Now, where your data comes from is called a data stream. And for most of you, it's going to be a website. So when you select where does the data come from, where's the data stream, you're going to select a website and you're going to put in a URL. But the reason people get confused here a little bit, like why are they asking me this, is because the GA4 is designed to collect data from both apps and from websites. Now, once you take that step, it's going to create a measurement ID. And that is something that you're going to refer to a couple times as you use Google Analytics. And it's also going to create a Google Tag ID. Now, at this point, most of you are using a website that has some kind of content management system. And many content management systems have either native integrations with Google Analytics or plugins. And depending on your website, you're just going to drop that measurement ID and that Google Tag ID into that functionality that your platform asks for. And from that point on, it's going to be super simple. It'll do rest of the work and it'll get you connected. Now, again, I can't speak to how everyone's website is built, but that's generally going to be the experience most of you face, is that there will be a plugin or native functionality within your website that asks you for one or two of those elements, and that's how Google Analytics will get set up on your website. So quick summary for first timers. Remember, you need a Google account. And I would say if you're just beginning, you're in a great spot, because if you use the same Google account, the same Gmail address for your Google Ads, for your Google Business Profile, for your Google Tag Manager, for your Google Search Console, for your Google Analytics, if one email address owns all of those at the highest level, man, things are going to connect. Boom, 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 boom. If it's not that way, we can still get them connected, but it's a little bit harder. So if you're just starting out, you're actually at a little bit of an advantage right now than some people who are halfway into this. Remember to choose web as the property and web as the data streams, where some people get discombobulated there a little bit. And that's going to create a measurement ID, and then simply take the measurement ID and the Google Tag ID into your website CMS. So that's it, first timers. It's super easy. It's not as hard as you might have thought it was going to be to get started with Google Analytics. Now, where does Google Tag Manager fit into all this? You've heard the phrase. Some of you are going, do I need it? Do I have to use it? And the answer is no. You do not need Google Tag Manager to be successful in Google Analytics. So what is Google Tag Manager and what is its role? And the way that I like to explain it is by kind of comparing it to what happens now when you go to the hospital. And 5 or 6 years ago, if you needed multiple medications or fluids, you might get multiple IVs, right? Your arm would be punctured multiple times. And today what they do is they put in a single port in there, and then the different medications and fluids flow through a single port so that you don't have multiple punctures in your arm. And that's the idea behind Google Tag Manager. You see, it's a port that you're going to connect to your website. Now, Google Tag Manager is a SaaS-based, a software in the cloud-based program owned by Google that you can sign up for. It's free. And you connect Google Tag Manager singularly to your website. And then from that point on, Google Tag Manager acts as a port. And anything of a tracking nature or code that you want to put on to the website, instead of logging into your website admin area, you'll go into Google Tag Manager. And many of the popular tracking codes are pre-formatted. So it makes it very easy to install them. So it takes it from what used to be a task that might have required developer level knowledge to anybody who has any kind of level knowledge can be able to insert any kind of tracking code into a website that uses Google Tag Manager. Now, I want to stress that it's not a requirement, so why do it? Well, it makes it a little bit easier, and it reduces the amount of manual inputting that you have to do. So it reduces some manual input errors, and because several of the popular tracking things are kind of pre-formatted, it's less likely that you're going to make a mistake. Now, it also gives you some more flexibility as it relates to Google Analytics. We're going to talk about events and key events coming up in just a minute. And a lot of those that come out of the box with Google Analytics are going to be great for you. But there are certain situations where you may need to track or collect data onto something that isn't automatically in Google Analytics. And Google Tag Manager makes it much easier to create variants of these events. Now, if that was confusing, don't worry, because we're going to talk about events in just a minute, and that'll be clear. My point here is that Google Tag Manager allows you to enhance or customize things that you can get out of Google Analytics easier than if you had to have a developer do it for you. And finally, even though it's called Google Tag Manager, because it comes from Google, you can use it to put in code from HubSpot or your Meta or Taboola or any other ad network on there. So lots of popular tracking pixels can be put into your website by using Google Tag Manager. All right. So again, quick summary, not required, makes it a little easier. It's free. You can go to google.com/tag manager, or you can just Google Tag Manager and get to that. Sign up, and getting it on your website is very easy, but we don't dive into Google Tag Manager on this program, or we truly will be here for 12 hours. All right, you feel good about Google Tag Manager? All right, well, let's go forward a little bit and let's talk about some things to do before we try to get data out of it. So let's talk about a kind of a pre-flight checklist to do. And it's going to start with this section of Google Analytics, which is very misnamed. All right, it's called real time, terrible name. It should be called real time, give or take 10 or 12 minutes is what the actual name should be. But the first thing you're actually going to do is open up your website. Now, assuming you've got Google Analytics installed, and once you get there, click on something, right? Click on go to another page, drop down a menu, whatever, just click on something. Once you've got your website open, then you're going to go into Google Analytics and you're going to click on reports, and I'm going to show you this in just a second. You're going to go to the misnamed real time, and we're going to drag the map, and the first thing you should do is you should see your location. And I'll talk about in a couple seconds why you might not see your exact location. But then the pages that you've gone should show up in real time in Google Analytics. And if you don't see this, well, then you'll know that something is wrong. So here's what it's going to look like when you're in Google Analytics. Now, I've got this website open right now, and I'm on it as a visitor in another tab. So if I drag that map, you can see that that's me right there. So I've got one positive signal that something good is happening. Now, if I scroll down on the bottom of this, you'll see that I can see the page titles that have been visited. Now, fortunately, here where I am, it's 10:24 in the morning. Not many people visiting this website. So these page titles should really reflect what I did. And if you scroll down just a little bit, the things that I did should be reflected right here in this list. Okay. So good thing to do at the beginning of the day, maybe before your website gets crazy. And because you are one of the few visitors, in fact, if you look at this one right now, this particular website has 3 active users in the last 30 minutes. Now, why might you not see your location? Because it's using where your IP address is. So if you work for a company and you're on a company network and the base of the IP address is in a city that you're not in, maybe you don't see your location. So that's something to be wary of. But even if that's the case, your activity should be tracked in these cards. Right? You should see your things that you do and the pages that you visit right here. So that's kind of step number 1, is that you should be able to go to the misnamed real time and be able to see your activity in that. So match your events and see if you can see yourself. Now, the other thing you have to do to make sure that your Google Analytics is set up correctly is take an extra step. Because right now, if maybe you've been in Google Analytics and you're not collecting data on demographics, age, gender, household income, that's because you have to take an extra step to turn that on. And let's take a look at how to do that. And you're going to click on the gear icon, which is in the lower left-hand corner. And again, remember, you're going to get the recording, and we'll have all these steps on there. You're going to click on data settings, data collection, and you turn on Google Signals data collection. And what that means is when you see a lot of the demographic data in Google Analytics, most of it is coming from data that you, the user, have shared with Google on other properties. Like, for example, when you set up that Google account that maybe you're logged into Chrome with, or perhaps some apps that you use quite frequently that Google has an agreement with to trade data with. And by you turning on that signal, that's going to allow that data to flow. If you don't turn that on, you're not going to see that data. Now, you might be asking, why don't they just do it, right? Why don't they just turn that on? And here's my theory, unconfirmed. Google is facing a lot of privacy issues in many areas of the world, particularly in the European Union. And by them making you do this, it gives them a plausible deniability to say, well, we didn't collect that data. You did. You turned it on. We didn't collect it. So that's perhaps why you have to take this extra step to be able to do that. And so when you take those steps, the page is going to look just like this. And it's just a simple button. All you have to do is slide it to the right, and you'll begin collecting that data. And remember that this is not retroactive. It's only going to collect from this point forward. So if you want to see age, income, and gender data, it's not going to go backwards. It's only going to go forward. So let's talk about events and key events. And I think a great way to understand events is to think about going to the grocery store, which today, with as great as delivery is, maybe it's been a while since you've been to a grocery store, but there's a lot of things that you could do at a grocery store that if the grocery store collected data about this, would really help them understand how you use a grocery store and what value you brought to them. I mean, think about all the things that you do measurably. When you go, you might weigh some produce, you might pull an instant coupon out of those flashing red light things, ask a question at the deli counter, you might put a product in your shopping cart, maybe you get a number at the deli, maybe pick up a product, all kinds of measurable, distinct activities that would help the grocery store company understand your journey through the grocery store. So for the grocery store, each one of them might be events that they want to measure to understand your trip throughout the grocery store. And in Google Analytics, it takes the same philosophy in that there are these things called events, which consist of your journey throughout a particular website that provide insights into how you use a particular website. Now, there are some events that are called default events. You don't have to do anything. They're going to be measured the minute you set up Google Analytics. They're going to start counting. You don't have to do anything. And you can see the list of those on the screen. And for many of you on the program today, depending on what you're trying to measure, they might be okay. They might work. Of course, every one of you wants to measure something different to judge the success of your website. But this is what comes out of the box, and you have to take no action to begin to record these events. But maybe you want something more, and Google Analytics offers what are called advanced data events. Now you're looking at the screen right now and you're saying, man, a few things on that list look pretty similar to the things on this list. So what's the difference between the things on this list and the things on this list? Well, the default events, are not customizable. You cannot do anything with them. They are what they are. These can be customized a little bit to provide some greater insights. For example, this view search results, it's just a counter. All it's going to do is count the number of times that if you have an on-site search on your website, it's just going to count the number of times that people used it. But what if you said, hey, I want to see what they type into that search. I want to be able to track what they do after they use the search. you're going to have to use this site search event because it is customizable. Similarly, you see file download, second one on this list, and all it's going to do is automatically count anytime someone downloads a file. But what if you said, well, what I really want to do is I want to measure when someone downloads a PDF or just all the PDFs, just a particular file type, then you're going to have to use this one. So that's the big difference. Can't do anything with these. They are what they are. You can modify these a little bit to give them context and enhance them with additional data. But you have to turn them on. They don't come automatic. And again, we're going to get back to the question, why not? Why do they not just automatically come on? But to be able to get to them, you're going to click the gear icon. You're going to click data streams. And assumably, many of you are only going to have one data stream. So you'll click on that data stream, and then you'll turn on enhanced measurement. Now let's take a look at what that looks like. And again, remember that you're going to have this recording as well. But if I go over here to the gear icon on the left-hand side, and I click on that, and then I go to data streams, and like many of you, this website's only going to have one. And if I click on that, you can see here, I have this one button to toggle for enhanced measurement. So again, the question becomes, why do you have to turn it on? Why doesn't it come automatically turned on for you? And my personal theory is, again, I think the answer is the same. I think it's because Google wants to give themselves plausible defensibility in saying that they didn't collect this data, that you chose to collect this data. So reminder, it looks like that. I don't think you're ever going to have a reason to turn it off. But if you did have to turn it off, you would just turn it off right there. So we've got default events. We've got advanced events. And we have what are called recommended events. And there is an enormous list of recommended events. If you Google the phrase Google Analytics recommended events, it's a giant list, and you can sort of sort it by your industry. I'm not sure the sorting makes a lot of sense, frankly, but it's there. Now, to set up these events, this is where Google Tag Manager is probably going to come into play. Because if you use the syntax that you see on the screen, meaning call it exactly that, character for character, space for space, it'll be quick. It's not a custom event at that point because you're using Google's syntax, and that exact language tells Google Analytics what to collect. But you have to manually add them one by one, and the easiest thing to do is to add them into GA4. Now this kind of seems a little bit confusing, right? So how do you decide which one of these to use? Well, the first thing you've got to do is decide, what do you want to collect? What do you want to analyze, right? Think about creating the question first, and then we got to figure out how to get the right answer. But in probably 60% of the cases of the people on the program today, as you can see on the top of the chart, if it's automatically collected, then just keep using that. If it's one of the ones that comes out of the box, great. But remember, you can't customize it, and a lot of times they don't have any context. And I would say on that point, for example, form submissions. Most companies don't want to record in general how many forms were submitted, but they would prefer to record that this form was submitted and separately this form was submitted. Now, you may have noticed up until this point, by the way, that phone calls weren't on any list. So tracking a phone call is a custom event at the bottom of this chart. So kind of going down, depending on what your data collection needs are, you might be able to get by with that first box and do nothing. Probably you're going to want to turn on for sure enhanced events because then you can customize them a little bit. And then anything beyond that, you maybe want to start talking about getting some professional advice, either using the recommended events, which come with a syntax but don't come with implementation. And then if there's something specific you need, then you might want to do a custom event. Let's talk about what a custom event might be. We work with a lot of elective medical practices and med spas, and a lot of them use third-party booking engines. So you go to the website, you click on a button that says book now, and when you click on that button, you go off to another website, another URL, and without custom events, you really don't know what happened. So depending on the booking platform and how it handles Google Analytics, we might be able to create a custom event that shows they completed a booking session, not just clicked on the button, but actually created an appointment and in some cases paid for it. Or if the booking engine can't do that, we can't measure everybody that just clicks on the booking button, because particularly mobile, you got a lot of fat fingers and you would get a false positive. So what's the context that indicates somebody's clicking that button for real? Probably length of time on that page, because once you click on the booking button and then you go and select your appointment time and your service, etc., a certain amount of time has elapsed, and you go back to that because that's the page that was open in another tab. So then the event becomes clicked on button plus spent X amount of time on page equals a custom event that gives a clearer picture that somebody did take an action that was valuable for that. So lots of opportunities for custom events, but I think at that point is when you may need some technical assistance to get that done. So what's the difference between an event and a key event? A key event is the event that you've said, man, that brings the most value to our organization. Yeah, like the grocery store, a lot of things are meaningful in understanding how someone travels through a grocery store. But at the end of the day, what puts money in the grocery store's pocket is when you go check out, right? So that key event is the one that is elevated just a little bit higher to measure. And so then a very popular thing to track, almost mandatory, if I may, is your key event conversion rate. Because what's your website's job? I mean, it's got a lot of jobs, but the most important one is to convince people to engage with your business. If it wasn't persuasive in getting people to engage with you in some way, what's it there for? And the only way to make your website more persuasive is to know how persuasive it is right now, and that is your key event conversion rate. So again, going back to the grocery store, yeah, all of those events are important for the grocery store to track, but the checkout is the key event, and they want to, of course, measure how many people walk through the door that actually make a purchase versus how many people that just walk in the door, maybe pick up a few things, look at them, but decide, no, that's not quite right for me, and walk out. So events help us understand the journey, help us understand the experience, but a key event is the one that makes the most monetary or significant contribution to the organization. All right. Now, some of you are right now going, key event. I've never heard that term before. And that's because in March and April of this year, Google decided to change what used to be called a conversion into a key event. So as you hear the terms goal or conversion, which is the word that Google still uses in Google Ads, but yet describes the same thing in Google Analytics as a key event, in general, when you hear a goal or conversion or key event, in general, it is describing the same thing. Not sure why Google changed it to key event in Google Analytics, but left it as a conversion in Google Ads. Seems a little strange, but that confusion can be cleared up by just you simply remembering that these three terms in general mean the same thing. Now, in a common key events that people set up, of course, phone call. Remember that phone call is a custom event, doesn't come out of the box. Form submissions, of course. Purchase, if you're here today and you run a e-commerce website, or becoming more popular is, did they use a widget? So we have a landscaping company that has a calculator that helps you calculate how much mulch you need or how much soil you need, that widget. We want to know whether people are using that because that's a very high level of engagement. We have a couple elective medical practices that have kind of mini surveys that help you understand if you're a candidate for a particular type of treatment. So we want to understand if they're using that, if that's helping them create a level of commitment that will lead them to the next step. So measuring a widget is also a popular key event that many people use. So how does something go from an event to a key event in Google Analytics? And I would say that this is probably one of the few places in GA4 where something got simpler, got easier. Because I'll show you where to find all of your events in just a second, but once you're there, you're going to go back to that gear icon and you're going to click on data display and it will show you the list of events. It's going to look just like this. Just 3 steps. So any event that you've set up, it'll show you all the default events, which are there. If you added enhanced events, they'll be there. If you've created custom events, they're going to be there. And all you have to do is slide this button that you see on the screen to the right to make it a key event. Now, if something changes, and it does happen, and you want something else to be a key event, you just slide the button to the left and take the other event and elevate it by sliding its button to the right. Honestly, it couldn't be easier. And I wish they would do it this way in Google Ads. It could be much easier. In fact, it's funny how they've done certain things in Google Analytics that you think they could have very easily done in their other products, and they've chosen not to. And speaking of other products, you can get a lot of data out of Google Ads and Google Search Console if you connect it to Google Analytics. And probably place number 2, that Google has made things much, much easier. But here's something super important that I want you to write down, because I'd say, half of the people that I work with that get stuck here, this is the reason why they've gotten stuck. Because to connect to accounts, you have to be logged in as a user that has edit level access on the Google Analytics account and edit level access on the Google Ads account or the Google Search Console account. Now, each one, Google Ads, Google Analytics, has different levels of user access. And of course, they use different names to describe them. Thank you, Google. But some of them you can edit and some of them you can't. So in Google Ads, for example, your user level could be, it's called email. And all you are able to do is get email reports. Now, if you have that level access, but you have admin level access in Google Analytics, and you're the one that tries to connect the 2 accounts, it's going to fail. Because you have to have the same level of edit access between these 2 accounts, both Google Ads and Google Search Console. Now, once you establish that that's true, then all you have to do is click on that gear icon again, click on product links, click on Google Ads, and then, of course, it's the very same process to do for Google Search Console. And for those of you that have connected up Google Search Console previously, you know that this is a way, way easier way to do it. So again, I'm going to click on the gear icon, get back to the main admin area. There's my product links section over here, and I'm just going to click on Google Ads. And here you can see this one is already linked up. But let's go back, because I don't think this one has Google Search Console clicked up. So let's take a look at that. We'll go to our links, Search Console, and it doesn't. So when I click this button here, link, it's going to show me all of the accounts that the address that I'm currently logged in as has available to link. See that? So I have to have the highest level access of these Google Search Console accounts in order to be able to link it. So it's all very account driven. Now, you know what's funny is that they certainly could have done this with Google Business Profile, right? I mean, it's kind of the same thing very much, but they didn't, and I don't understand why. So if you want to connect your Google Business Profile to Google Analytics, you still have to use what are called UTM tracking parameters. So if you've been into your Google business profile, you know that there's now more than 2 links. There's a website link and a quote or service link. Been recently expanded. You can put in more than that now. So instead of just putting in the link, you have to put in a tracking parameter that would allow Google Analytics to understand where that traffic came from and be broken out as a separate observable item, which is really weird because you saw how easy they made it to connect Google Ads and Google Search Console. It's mystifying to think that they couldn't use the same exact functionality to connect Google Business Profile. The mysteries of Google, right? Okay, so we've connected our Google Ads, we've connected our Google Search Console. We kind of understand what are the best events to set up as key events. So now let's get into why most of you may have come this morning, and that is to get some data out of Google Analytics. And again, I just want to stress the goal here in this session is not to teach you everything about Google Analytics. It is to teach you what are some of the most valuable things to get out. We'll go through how to get them out and why they are so valuable, and there's going to be 5 of them. So let's get started. And the first one is to really understand where your best traffic comes from. And as I work with so many owner-operators, I think their number one point of frustration is they really don't know how to prioritize their time. And maybe some of you feel that frustration, like, oh, should I be doing more about organic ranking? Should I be doing these Google ads? Should I be doing, everybody says social media. What should I be doing? Well, let's understand what's working today. Because if we understand what's working today, we can make one of 2 decisions. Either we can say, well, let's push that thing that's working really well and get our time and energy behind it, and we can make more success if we're sailing with the wind rather than against the wind, which is generally a good strategy for a lot of companies, right? You can make more progress in something that you're already accelerating in than it is to go from a stop and try to make progress. Now, the other way, depending on how mature your business is you might look at this and say, let's address our weakest link. And if we're not doing well in our Google Ads or our paid social, let's set out a plan to be able to correct that now that we understand that it's not performing as well as the other ones. So in order to understand which channel is working best for you, we're now going to go to the reports section, and we're going to go to acquisition and traffic acquisition. And whenever you do a report like the one that I'm talking about in the next 5, always check your date range, because you as a business may want to compare the previous time period. Maybe you have some heavy seasonality in your business and it doesn't make sense to compare October to September, and it makes more sense to compare October to October of 2023. And depending on the amount of traffic you have, 30 days might be an insignificant amount of data. So always check your date range. In fact, when I do more advanced programs of Google Analytics and someone says, hey, Matt, I didn't get the answer that you got, almost always the answer is that they were using a different date range. So check your date range. Now let's go through this kind of step by step, because I'm going to throw a curveball at you coming up. So remember that we're going to go to reports, which is the section we're in right now. And then we're going to go to acquisition. We're going to open that up, and that's what these arrows do. They expand our menu options. And then we go to traffic acquisition. And generally, if you've not made any changes, it's going to look like this. It is the default look of where your traffic came from. Now, note something across the top here, that it doesn't have key events. In fact, coming out of the box, actually, I think they just made a change that key events are at default. But if you don't see key events as default, but you can see here that total revenue is a default, and many of you may not need to see total revenue, then we're just going to edit this report. And the way that you edit this report is to click on this pencil. And in this pencil, we can change our dimensions and our metrics. And I know some of you are saying, well, that's great, Matt, but I have absolutely no idea what a dimension and a metric is, so I probably wouldn't change that. Well, let's talk about that. A dimension is what can be measured, and a metric is how we are going to measure it. So, for example, if we look at this class picture, elementary class picture, and we said, well, what would we want to measure here? Maybe we want to measure the average height. Okay, so that's a dimension. We want to measure height. How would we measure height? We could measure height in inches, centimeters, millimeters. Those are metrics. Dimension, what are we going to measure? Metrics, how are we going to measure it? Maybe we want to measure the intelligence of this group. That's a dimension. How would you measure it? This standardized test A would be a metric. Standardized test B would be another metric. So dimension is what we want to measure, and then the metric is how we are going to measure it. So in Google Analytics, we've got those same options to be able to change it for those reports. So if we go back to that edit screen and we click on metrics, you're going to see the metrics that come as a default. And the thing that you may have to do, though, is get familiar with the nomenclature. So go back to the earlier part of the presentation and think about some of the key events. Because if I want to measure key events, session key event rate, I've added that, and then I can take out revenue because that's not relevant. And if I want to change the appearance of that report, I'm just going to drag these in different ways. Now, the other thing that you may see on your screen right now that may be drawing some questions is, what's the difference between a session and a user? One user can have multiple sessions. So think about how someone might use your website, and we all kind of go to a website, kind of come back to it. So if I do a Google search and I find your website and I go, man, that's interesting. And then I go, either I want to think about it, or maybe I have to tell my wife about it, come back to it. I come back to it a lot of times on a different device. Then I'm going to come back. I'm still one user, but I'm two sessions. So we can look at journeys through the lens of sessions, and we can look at journey through the lens of users. Some of you, the data may not differ that much, and some of it might. So in this case, we're kind of looking at it through the eyes of sessions. And in these metrics, we've got the total number of sessions. We've got the number of engaged sessions. And I think if there's a question I get from our clients the most is, why do you tell me about engaged sessions? And I think that's a leftover from older days when maybe unscrupulous advertising agencies, digital agencies would do some tricks to just generate traffic that really wasn't any value. I mean, there's lots of places on the internet that you can go to and just pay to have bots come and hit a site so that you artificially stimulate the numbers, right? Super, super easy. If you wanted to impress your client and say, oh my God, I generated 2,000 more visits this month, super easy to do that. Harder to make them engage sessions, because engaged sessions is someone who spent a particular amount of time, I think it's more than 10 seconds, or clicked on something on a website, so engaged. So for some websites, if you see a giant difference between the number of sessions and the number of engaged sessions, it may mean that you're dealing with a lot of bot traffic, or potentially a less than honorable way of someone generating traffic to your website. In the ideal world, you'd like to think the two numbers are the same, but that's what distinguishes a session from an engaged session. So that session key event rate is the percentage of people, percentage of sessions, made a mistake there, not people, the percentage of sessions that took the desired action that you determined was the key event rate. The engagement rate is the percentage of people that became engaged sessions, the percentage of sessions that became engaged, which I think is kind of meaningless. the average engagement time per sessions, and the number of events per session. So let's go back to the grocery store for just a second, and you can see this would be kind of insightful for them, right? Like how many events did someone do? How many times did they pick a product off of a shelf and put it in the cart? Did they go to the deli? Did they go to the bakery? That would be a valuable thing for them to understand. So then if they looked at events per session by gender, by hour of day, by day of the week, they could be getting some insights about where do and when and who are some of their best customers. So certainly we've got that key event, which is the end all measurement. But what if we get a lot of events? Somebody goes to the store, and what if they didn't check out? Or in your case, what if they didn't fill out a form or make a phone call or use a widget? What happened? I think it's a great opportunity for you to say, well, were there any technical limitations? Did the button on the form not fire? Is your phone number not clickable on the website? Is the button that you use in the form, is the form too long? Is it too unappealing? You know, it's a very fragile relationship you have with website visitors. And the tiniest thing can just make them go, got to be an easier way to do this. Just like that, right? So if you have a lot of events per session and a low number of key events, might be an indication that something is wrong with how that key event is packaged or sold, or perhaps has some technical limitations to it. And then we can, for some reason, if you wanted the pure event count. But the takeaway here, if I want to change what that report says, I'm going to click on metrics and I'm going to juggle these around. Don't forget to click apply. A lot of people do. And then a little oddly with GA4 here, before I can go back and actually look at that report, I'm asked if I want to save it. Now, here's what I do. I don't recommend this for everybody, and I actually don't want the people at my company to know that I do this, but I just click save. I just save the current report that I'm working on, because my assumption is if I'm ever going to use this report again, I probably want these same changes, whereas probably the best practice is to save it as a different report so that the default report is unchanged. Either way, you do it however you want to do it. I know that I might go back and save over a change that I just did a day ago, but that just saves me a little bit of time. And so now the changes that I made on that report are available here. Here's event count. And because we put key events right up here, now we have a great indicator as to which channel is working. Now, as you look at the screen very closely, you're saying, man, this must be one awesome website because it's got 100% here and 100% here. No, it just means the events and the key events are not set up correctly. No website has 100% key event rate, unless you're in the porn business, I guess. But if you see 100%, definitely something is wrong. So this would be, let's go audit this and figure out what's wrong. But if this were set up correctly, we look at the channels, which is the purpose of this number one report, and say, hey, where am I making the most progress? I can see by channel the number of sessions, and I can see that key event rate, and I can see that engagement rate. So where am I getting my best traffic from? What's already working for me? And so maybe on the one hand, I say, let's go push that. Let's go do some more of that. Or maybe I say, hey, we're investing a lot of money into this Google Ads. It's comparatively not working as well as other channels. What do we need to do to fix the weakest link? All right. So in any scenario, this report is going to be very valuable for you. And so that's report number one. What channel is working well for you? I will say goodbye to the class here, and we'll talk about how to get number two, and that is the healthiest pages. Now, I'm often surprised that people still think in terms of websites, because really you want to think in terms of web pages, because Google does not return websites. Google returns web pages on a Google search engine results page. And as we've become more specific in how we search, it's critical that we have pages that line up with how people search. And when there's a piece of research out there that says, most of the results after number two on a typical Google search result are not the homepage of a given website, because you see this evolution happening right in front of you. The more specific you are as you search, Google wants to return the most relevant and applicable information. And if that is on a interior page of a website, and if everything's done correctly, that's the page it's going to return. It's not going to return the home page of a website it thinks has the best information. It's going to return the web page. So with that said, now all of a sudden your individual web pages become sort of like their own individual salespeople, right? And what I find is that many companies have great pages on one particular service and maybe a page that's not as effective for another service for whatever reason. Maybe they just aren't as passionate about it when they sell it, or maybe they didn't even realize that this page was coming up for that particular phrase. So to find the pages that are effective, we're going to look at all of our pages and just see which ones bring us the most value, or more specifically, which ones need to be enhanced a little bit. Is we're going to go back to reports. We'll go to engagement this time, pages and screens. Again, check the date range. And here's kind of the trick here in this particular report. You definitely have to do a secondary dimension, and I'll show you how to do that for device. Because if you look at the average website, it is going to show way different results on a mobile device than it does on a desktop. So if you just looked at the combined data, you would not get the insight that you're looking for. You have to break that down by device. So let's go a little bit slower here, and we'll go back to reports. And again, because I saved over that previous report, it's going to allow me to go back. If I didn't save it, it would ask me if I did want to save it. And so we'll go to reports, and this time we're going to go to engagement, expand that, and we're going to go to pages and screens. And here's the list of every page that is on the website. And again, check your date range, make sure you're working with a sample size large enough to work with. And so we can see how many views that page had, how many active engagements that had. The views per active user, I think, is irrelevant. The event count. But remember, just like our previous example, we can edit the metrics that we're viewing. So if we don't want to get views per active user, which I think is irrelevant, and I think active user is largely irrelevant for most people. And so we'll click apply, and then we'll click save. I always save changes to the current report. Do what I say, don't do what I do. You should probably save it as a separate report. And so I'm going to turn off this secondary dimension right here so that I can explain it more clearly. So here's what the report's going to look like. And you say, well, we've got a lot of pages here, and how much time does each person spend? Now you know your pages. So you may know that one has a video on it, maybe one doesn't on that, but it begins kind of to tell you which page is capturing people's attention and getting them to do the thing that you want to do. Remember, here's our event count, and here's our key events, then others. So we want to start working on the page that appears to be the weakest link. So to be able to see the mobile versus desktop, our first dimension, what are we going to measure, which in this case is page path and screen class. We're going to add a secondary dimension, which is going to be device and device category. And so now we see the same data, but just broken down by desktop and mobile. Now, you can sort this by here, clicking here. I'm not sure that's the best way. I think what I tend to do a lot of times is export this into a Google Sheet, and then I can manipulate this the way that I want to. But you're going to see some really stark differences between how well a page performs on mobile and how well it performs on desktop. And that's going to lead you to the best place to begin working on improving a page that isn't bringing the greatest value to the organization. Remember, it's about pages now. It's not about websites. So you want to pull a page report. The third thing that you want to be able to get out of Google Analytics is what pages are creating a best first impression. Remember that some of these pages are surfacing in Google search engine results. Some of these pages you're using as a landing page in Google Ads. Some of these pages maybe you're using as a landing page for your meta ads. So it's different when a page is a secondary page, when people come from something and go to that page, than when the page is the first thing that they see. we tend to still look at websites conventionally and think that everybody goes to the homepage, looks at the homepage, chooses what they want, and then goes to the secondary page. Well, if the website's done correctly, that's going to be the lesser traveled path. The greater traveled path is somebody goes to Google, searches something specific, and some page deep inside your website is going to be surfaced on that Google search engine results page because it matches up with what the Google searcher is looking for. First impressions matter, right? And I think you know this at every level of your life, whether it's people to people, going to a room for the first time, people make very fast, almost subconscious judgments about whether or not they're in the right place for what they're trying to achieve. So for this report, we're pretty much going to do exactly the same thing that we did in the previous report, except the difference is instead of choosing page, path, and screen in that same place, you're going to choose landing page. But everything else is the same. What's the difference? Landing page was their point of entry, their first impression. And as crazy as it sounds, some pages that do well as a secondary page don't do well as a landing page. So if a page is a landing page, it has to be a page that has a lot of breathability to it, that people can grasp quickly, scan quickly, because remember, people don't read, they don't want to read. So a landing page has to be something they can digest, absorb, and skim fast and make a decision. You know, an interior page where you're presenting them with a lot of detailed information and they've already chosen to go there, that's different. That's why a lot of times in Google Ads, the same page that works really well for a Google organic ranking doesn't work as well sometimes for a Google Ads landing page, because the page has a substantive amount of content that allows it to rank, but too much content for someone who's clicked on an ad to be able to make a quick decision as to whether or not they want more. So third report that we want to get out of Google Analytics is which pages are creating the best first impression. Remember that website users typically do not hunt for what they want. That's kind of an old school way of thinking. If they don't see what they want immediately, they generally just go back and look at another website on that Google search engine results page. People are very impatient now on Google, so this is a very important report to get. So the fourth report that we want to get out of Google Analytics is what are the characteristics of the people that are most receptive to your message. And where this is going to have pure dollar value is that when you look at your advertising programs, you're going to find that not everybody receives your message in the same way. And that will differ by gender, it will differ by age, it will differ by geography. And once you start determining these patterns, that people that are between the ages of 18 to 24 never do one of your key events, then ultimately you ask yourself, why do we spend money to keep running our ads in front of 18 to 24s if they are half as likely or a quarter as likely to do one of our key events than someone who is 35 to 44? Let's spend our money on the 35 to 44s. And that same judgment you're going to see by geography, you're going to see clearly by age, potentially by gender, not always, and sometimes but not always by household income. So let's talk about how to get this data. It's very similar, but this time we're going to go to business objectives. We're going to click on traffic. We're going to go to demographic details. And this one's a little bit complicated in that we have to change that primary dimension. Remember last time we added a secondary dimension. This time we have to change the primary dimension and again add that secondary dimension for device. And maybe you want to add a filter for geography, which I'm going to show you in just a second. Why do I say maybe? Is because a lot of websites get traffic that they don't want. They get traffic from places they cannot serve, that they cannot sell to. So once someone comes to the site and realizes you cannot satisfy them, why do we want to include their actions in the journey when they're never going to do one of your key events? Why do we want to lump that in with our data? So potentially we might want to add a filter for the appropriate geography. So think about your own personal circumstances. I would tell you that happens more than you think it does. So if you only sell to people in the Orlando DMA, then maybe you want to look at just people in the Orlando DMA rather than looking at about everybody that came to your website. So we'll go back to reports. Well, I'm going to discard my changes because I didn't save it. Go to business objectives. Click on traffic, demographic details. And I'm not 100% sure what the default is. I think the default is age, but I'm not 100% sure. And I've changed this so many times, I'm not 100% sure. So see this right here? So here I've broken it down by age, and I can see that same data by age. So I could see whether or not someone of a particular age was more likely to take one of my key events and how many events did they go through. So by changing the primary dimension, see right here, this is where we added the secondary dimension before. But this time, if I want to look at gender, I'm going to have to change the primary dimension to gender. Now, I could also take the primary dimension of age and add a secondary dimension of gender. And I could get great data that way. But our topic here is understanding the who. Who is more receptive to our content than other people? So primary dimension, we've gone to demographic details. We can change that to age and gender. So we're looking at age right now. Let me close this. We can also change that primary dimension to city. And as you can see here, Warsaw, which I'm pretty sure is not in Florida, New York, none of these people can be satisfied by this business. So why should we want to include them in the ranking? So how do we create a filter? We're going to go up here, and I wish I could see your faces because I want to make sure that I'm not going too fast. I'm going to create a filter. And again, dimension, what are we going to measure? Well, we're going to measure city. So I'm going to start typing city, and city pops up. I'm going to choose that. And you want to choose exactly matches. Always choose exactly matches, because that means that data structure of information is present. So then city matches, and then it will populate all of the ones that are in there. I can start typing in Orlando. I can choose Orlando. And now by adding this filter, all of a sudden now I'm looking at city, but I'm going to choose age because I've filtered out. Now I'm just looking at people that came from Orlando by age. And in Orlando, we had 55 to 64s in this time period and a bunch of unknowns. Why are there so many unknowns? Remember that the primary source of age comes from within your use of Google products, but you could be using a cookie blocker. You could be, when you were in Google Ads, maybe you used, when you were on Chrome, maybe use an ad blocker, maybe use a different browser that's preventing that information from flowing through. So if Google can't tell with a high degree of confidence how old the user is, then it gets thrown into a bucket called unknown. That's why that bucket's there. All right. So let's review what we did here. We went to business objectives. We went to demographic details. I think the default is age. I'm not sure, but we changed the primary dimension here between age, gender, and city. And by the way, Google Analytics calls state region. Region equals state. So if you wanted to do all of Florida, you would do region. Region equals Florida. And then up here, we added a filter, and our current filter is when city matches Orlando. And we can filter, again, by any of those dimensions that we discussed earlier. And I think using filters is generally a way for you to hone in on who you really want to measure, because you will get traffic from people you don't care about. All right, so our fourth thing that we want to get out of Google Analytics is understanding who is most receptive, and maybe in some cases you want to understand who's not most receptive to your message, and that report is the way to do that. Last one, we're in the home stretch. The fifth thing that we need to do to be able to get out of Google Analytics is what geography your best visitors come from. And that's going to really be that same exact report, but instead of using the primary dimension of age or gender, you're going to use the primary dimension of city, or potentially in your case, region. And I have to tell you, this is really important. I can't tell you how many businesses we come across that are spending money unknowingly in markets that they simply can't serve, that either too long of a drive or there's a competitor closer to that city, and the money is not productive, and the money is never going to be productive. And this is one of the best places to see that. So 5 things to get out of Google Analytics, and this is the 5th, which is what geography do your best visitors come from. Now, many of you have asked in doing this program, how do you filter out your own internal traffic, which is important, right? Because you behave in a way completely opposite that the average unbiased person is going to use your website. So having your data in there, people that work for your company in there, it's completely skewing the data. So let's talk about how to filter out your internal traffic. And remember, this only works if you have a fixed IP address. I'm going to give you another bonus tip in just a second, but you would go to that gear icon, click on data streams. And when you do this, it's a lot of scrolling. And I think this is why people don't see it. Then you would click on your data stream name. Again, most of you are only going to have one. You're going to click configure tag settings, and there's the show more. Many people don't click on the show more. Click on the show more, and then click on define internal traffic. And you have a number of options to do it, and one is by IP address, and then you're going to put in your IP address, which of course is only going to work if you have a fixed IP address. An alternative to that is if you use Chrome quite a bit, there is a Chrome extension that blocks your data from Google Analytics. Now, when you use it, it's going to block it from all applications of Google Analytics, including your own website, but also other people's websites. As on the agency side, we have to use it because we're in everybody's analytics. So the better thing to do is to use this technique, because to be fair, you probably don't want to block yourself out from other companies who are trying to achieve the same thing you are in Google Analytics and block out your use of other companies' Google Analytics. Now, the other thing that you can do is create a comparison. So we talked about comparing mobile versus desktop, but you probably thought it was a little hard to read when they were stacked on top of them. And Google Analytics does have a neat feature, and I think this is a little bit easier to use than the previous version. It's got a default mechanism to add a comparison, and it's right up here. So if I click on add a comparison, it's got some preset, these would be dimensions that I can put on. And probably one of the most common that you're going to do is mobile traffic, right? And you can create your primary dimension to be desktop traffic and then add a comparison for mobile traffic. Now, by the way, whenever you edit a report, you lose the comparison. So get your report set up the way that you want to, and then do your comparison. And you can see this is a much easier way to see that data. So if we had multiple rows here, it's clustered in an easier way to understand. So you add that comparison up here, and I would say mobile versus desktop. Here you see we're comparing all users, which includes mobile. What I can do is I can just simply change my primary dimension to be desktop users, and I'm comparing the two. Remember, if you edit the report, you lose the comparison. And sometimes I'll dump a lot of this stuff down to Google Sheets because it's actually even easier to do in a Google Sheet. All right, one more bonus tip is about data sorting and filtering, because it may not be just you that wants to use that data, but maybe you want to share it with somebody else. And if you go to the, how do you describe that icon? Yeah, I don't know that everybody recognizes it, so let's go back to it. I'm sure some of you know that this thing has a name. I don't really know what the icon's name is. but it's this one right here. And so you click on that and you have a number of options. You can send whatever report is on your screen to somebody else. You can schedule an email and say, hey, send this same data. It's going to use the date range that's already there. So make sure you have the same date range. Send it every Monday at 9 o'clock. You can do that. You can send this report as a link to another Google Analytics user, or you can download it as either a PDF, a .csv, or right into a Google Sheet. Many people will set up a scheduled email so they don't have to go into Google Analytics each time to get the data that they want. All right, I think we have one more bonus tip. No, we don't. That's our last bonus tip, which means we're at the point that we talk about what are we going to do tomorrow now that we have all this information in our hands. Number one, turn on Google Data Signals. That's why you're not getting the demographic data that we've seen today. Turn on Enhanced Events. The recording will remind you how to do that. Test the real time, which is really real time delayed by 10 minutes view to find yourself and your activity. If you don't see yourself and your activity, then your Google Analytics is not set up correctly. And then if you haven't already done it, set up key events, which means that you want to make sure that your events are set up correctly and then determine which of those or one is going to become your key event. Make sure you have that, and that's something you're going to import into Google Ads if you're using in Google Ads. And then once you've got everything in place, you kind of have to sit back and say, well, now let's look at the 5 things that we can get out. And maybe that reveals a topic that you want to dig into a little bit deeper. But you've got to be able to regularly look into your analytics. And any website is just like a garden. Once you plant it, if you don't attend to it, it's going to die. Absolutely. So you've got to continually pull things out that are not working and replant things that have the potential to work. Now, if you think you want this data that we've talked about today, but you want an easier way to get it, we can offer a free Google Analytics dashboard, which will take these 5 things that we talked about today, put them in one convenient active looker dashboard that is continually updating in real time. And that way you don't have to go into Google Analytics to get this. If you would like this, you simply have to make sure that you've got 3 things present. You've got to be able to make sure that you have GA4 installed, that you have permission to add another user to GA4, and that you have your key events set up. If you have that, you will get a dashboard that looks just like this, that automatically populates with that data. Bookmark that, keep it in your browser, and you always have everything that we talked about today. If you would like to get this live, evergreen, always updating dashboard, simply email info@RoarOnTheWeb. It's absolutely free, no cost. Just simply make sure you tell us your name, your website address, and your name of business. Take us about 2 to 3 days to set that up for you, and you'll have it forever. All right, that gives us not as much time as I thought, but a little bit of time for Q&A. And Teresa, I think you've been getting some questions that perhaps we can answer.
While my camera is turning on, a lot of the questions were, are we going to get a replay of this, and how and when will the recording be available? So we do a small amount of editing before we publish before we publish videos. So it can take up to 2 weeks to get that publishing completed and get it up on our YouTube channel. I also don't know if you saw the message that about 3/4 of the people who responded to your survey were beginners and 1/4 was a verifier.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Let's see. So go ahead and type your questions in the question chat box. I will be searching for those questions that I have not been able to answer, or those questions that are not tech support questions. And I'll go ahead and ask Matt verbally. That way, if you're having this question, maybe somebody else on this call is also having this question, and I'll be able to relay it back to Matt while he's here with us.
And we should say that a lot of that delay in producing that video is the AI that enhances what I look like, correct?
Oh, you know what? I will mention that. I'll mention that. We'll work on that. All right. We got somebody else to laugh with us, Matt. Well, it looks like I know what Matt goes through when he does this presentation in order to make it in a bite-sized format so that you're not sitting here all day. It is a lot to take in. It is a lot to consume. So if you have any questions now, feel free to ask them now. If you have any questions later on, I believe he has some information as well. You can speak to a one-on-one consultant. Our consultants can take you part of the way, but we definitely can't take you all the way, which is why we rely on the outside expertise of people like Matt, who's been a wonderful partner with us in helping us do these kinds of things with extreme expertise. And it looks like you gave some people in our audience a long list of things to do and check out. So thank you. Again, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation in your survey email. You'll receive an email from our system, sbdc@ucf.edu. The email will have the survey at the top and then a link or two with this presentation. I don't know if we have these two presentations connected maybe for that. So it might just be one link with mine and Matt's put together so that all you have to do is download one PDF. It will be in a PDF format for those of you who don't use Microsoft products. So PDF is pretty accessible to everyone. Let's see. All right, Matt, with your permission, I will go ahead and finish up my slides because it doesn't look like we have that. We don't have any questions really coming in. So if you're done with what you've got on your slides, I will take back over and finish up our exit discussion. All right, you all should be able to see my screen. So Matt is a presenter that comes and helps us out when we do this. If you have a business and you would like some no-cost one-on-one consulting, we'll be happy to help you. You can go ahead and click on the sbdcorlando.com/consulting link. As soon as you get your PDF, the link will also be at the bottom of the email. And you can schedule an appointment to meet with a consultant. Now, we cannot meet with a consultant until you fill out that form. We got to know a little bit about your business and make sure you're coming to the right area. We realize this is a webinar, and we can only help the people within our center's regions. But because the Florida SBDC covers the entire state of Florida, you will get to speak with somebody from the Florida SBDC if you fill out that link. You just may not get to speak with our little UCF region. You may speak with your UNF region or FAU region. So go ahead and fill out that link. No matter where you are, it'll connect you. If you're outside the state of Florida, go ahead and respond to the email and let us know and ask. We'll help you find the SBDC because we are in all 50 states and many of the U.S. territories. So we should be able to find somebody to help you that sort of does what we do. And so far, all I'm seeing in the chat is some questions about suggestions about some types of events that they would like us to also hold. And to that attendee, I would say it would be excellent if you would add that to our survey, because adding those comments like that to our survey is really where it will get noticed. I will, of course, send this information out to our event coordinator, our event manager here, but I will also encourage you to add that to your survey. There should be a comments section where you can suggest additional classes that you would like for us to hold. And with that being said, that's the end of our presentation. I don't see any more questions. Matt, do you have anything else you'd like to share before I let everyone go?
Just a final thought that remember, companies that use data are typically 70% more successful at beating their competition than companies that don't. So commit yourself to using data to drive your success.
Awesome. That was excellent. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you either virtually or in person soon. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everyone.